So, Chris, thanks for appearing at my event. I've been at a couple of yours now.
Yes.
With Mayor Newsom and so on. Yes. So, we've been exploring this idea that government needs to start acting like a platform. I love Blaze's analogy of trellis and grapes, because grapes grow better if you provide the trellis. In a lot of ways, that's a redefinition of the role of government, because it used to be that I think government thought of its mission as providing both trellis and grapes, and a lot of people sitting there with their hands out waiting for the grapes. And the new model, partly driven by budget constraints or anything else, is we've got to figure out how to help the people grow their own grapes. Yep. And that's a lot of what you're starting to think about in the city. How do you build IT as a platform for a 21st century city? So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what you're up to.
Well, I think the first thing that is interesting for folks who aren't used to government is that we are incredibly complex, a little dysfunctional, and we are hard to deal with internally, let alone externally. So what we're trying to do, and I think in major cities and certainly in San Francisco, is trying to simplify all of that down and really make it a much easier organization, much more nimble, much more able to react quickly and effectively to issues that are presented and thrown our way. And one of the things that we're doing is looking at this incredible rich store of data that we have and realizing that there's incredible value to that we've never really thought of before. And so one of the ways that we're doing to help ourselves internally and also help ourselves externally is to start releasing that data to the public and seeing what happens. It's kind of one big experiment, because we're really not sure what's going to happen, either short-term or long-term, but we're releasing that data.
So basically open data APIs for the city of San Francisco.
Open data, and I think we've released about 130 data sets so far.
Examples?
Crime data, rec and park data, services data, when they're open kinds of things. I mean, it's all over the map.
Right.
A lot of geospatial data. The Department of Technology manages kind of the base map of the city, and so that's all of that is right there. And from the release of that data sets, we have seen about 30 applications be developed in the private sector, taking that data and combining it with other data sets or combining it with geospatial capabilities and creating applications that either we don't have the money for, can't do, or haven't even thought of. So it's an amazing experiment to see kind of a true public-private partnership. When we release that data and we work with the public, what kind of cool things, what kind of great services can we now provide with the released data?
So one question I have here, as the city gets into this kind of developer platform business, are you starting to think about how you do platform evangelism? I was thinking about sort of open data release. It's a little bit like imagining Steve Jobs going on stage and saying, well, we've released a bunch of APIs. Thank you very much. Steve always has a real dog and pony show. Here's the really cool stuff. Oh, and wait, there's one more thing. And that takes a lot of spade work up front.
Yep.
And how do you as a city start to build that capability to reach out to developers, to find the people who are going to build the cool apps, and not just to kind of see what happens?
Well, I think the first thing that I'd like to say is that I'm very fortunate in San Francisco to have a boss, the mayor, who really gets transformative power of technology and really is supportive of something that most governments and most CIOs don't have, which is this permission to fail. So what Mayor Newsom has basically said to me is, try something new. The worst thing you can do for me is keep doing the old stuff or keep doing it the same way. And I want you to fail forward. And so that kind of sets the stage for everything we do, both internally and externally. So as we're trying new things and experimenting, we're kind of developing the vision, mission, goals, objectives, tactics as we go. Mm-hmm. And as we develop those, we are having greater and greater conversations like at these type of events, or just in the press, or simply meeting somebody over my apple at a coffee shop and just talking to folks. And it's kind of that organic, a little bit hit and miss, but it's a little bit of just allowing all those ideas to percolate up and eventually we figure out, we hear about them, and we latch on to ones that make sense,
Sure.
and we just build it that way. It's not particularly scientific, but it actually is working, kind of crowdsourcing all of this.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true. I mean, that's if you have built a good trellis and you plant the grapes, well, they'll eventually fill out the trellis. I guess maybe a very concrete question for you for this audience is, you have an audience of location-based developers here. You have some city services. You have some vision of things that you wish would get built. Are there particular projects that you say, wow, if I could have somebody from this community paying attention, I'd love them to pay attention to this particular problem? Or, for example, it would be great to have some help find parking apps, or it would be great to have some, when we were at City Camp in Chicago, I remember, I forget who it was, said, my conclusion is, if you're a pothole, it's John Udell, said, if you're a pothole, be afraid, be very afraid, because there were so many apps for reporting, potholes, okay, that's done. We don't need more of those, right? What do we need, and how would you guide this audience to helping you build a robust, ecosystem of interesting apps on what you're building?
So if we look at and do an analysis of the data sets that have been released, roughly half of them are transportation transportation applications that have been built. And I think for those of you who live in San Francisco or visit San Francisco, you know that it's a very transportation-centric city. And we have had problems with on-time and service delivery in the city. So I think one of the things that has created kind of organically is that the folks who are programming, who are living in the city, actually see that need to help us figure out how better to manage our transportation. And I think that's an unending area of need for the city. I think the second is really around crime data, and how we can better present maps or mash up items so that people can understand and kind of anticipate where crime may be happening or what would happen in the future if they bought a particular house or whatever it is. I think from a broad standpoint, I would say that what we're trying to do is develop APIs for all of the government services. So it's really public safety, it's transportation, it's commerce, it's rec and park, it's kind of general government, it's health. I mean, those are probably 6 of the major areas that we're looking at developing much more depth.
So talk to me about health. That's an area I'm very interested in because I'm working with Department of Health and Human Services in D.C. on the data sets that they're releasing, and it's a fascinating area. What do you have in mind there?
Well, this is a difficult one because obviously privacy and security of data is an amazing thing. But when the whole flu epidemic was being discussed, and we were talking about how can we present the data of where the flu is and where the places are to get the shots, and those kinds of things much more concretely, and make it available for folks, because there was not enough, as you remember, not enough shots, where the shots were, where the serum was available, all of those things. So at a very simple level would be just to help people understand on their daily lives where these things are occurring and where the help is coming from in terms of health. But I think that health is one that is problematic for so many areas and so many ways. So we're actually focusing more, I think, on transportation, on the business side, small business administration, creating jobs. And I think one of the interesting things that we've got going on is we're talking at multiple levels of government now on releasing the data and making it useful. Certainly, I've been talking to the state, and as you know, we've been talking to the national CIO, the national CTO, about doing this. And it really is the dream of releasing data at all the levels of government so that we can then offer you an opportunity to take those different data sets and really create some interesting applications that integrate data at all 3 levels or 4 levels.
So let me talk a little bit about financial impact from a couple of different directions. First of all, I saw a statistic recently that the EPA has reduced their FOIA requests by something like 93% as a result of making open data. Now, other agencies are really struggling with that. Have you seen kind of sort of any FOIA impact, or do you see an opportunity to reduce sort of bureaucratic overload by saying, hey, we don't have to actually have somebody respond to this request because it's just out there?
Exactly, and yes, we do, and we are saying that now, and I think there's a tremendous opportunity for that to happen. In San Francisco, actually, we have even a more stringent law. It's called the Sunshine Law. Mm-hmm. And we have struggled both from the city perspective and also the advocates on really what is a quick and efficient way to get the data. And I think that over time, as this is built up, these type of applications, releasing this data and having applications built, will actually do exactly what you said, which is push everybody to already data and already applications that show.
Right, so you'll presumably reduce costs as a result. Yeah. So, but I also want to talk from the point of view of developers. Getting involved in writing civic applications right now is the province of people who are passionate about open government. Yep. I don't know that we've really harnessed the profit motive yet. There are startups, companies like Outside In or EveryBlock doing, hyperlocal data. C-Click Fix, which has an app for reporting potholes and streetlights that are out and so on. The whole Open 311 movement. But it's not quite clear what the business model is. There's been thinking about advertising. I've been encouraging developers instead to think about, well, these are really two-sided applications. One is you're providing a service to the public, which may be free, but the other side may actually be selling a service to the city. And the example I've used is this company called crimereports.com, which basically builds a back end to help police manage the reports. Do you see that as a viable option for some of these developers? Because I think if we could harness the profit motive and they could say, wow, I've got a SaaS offering for the transportation department that will integrate all this citizen data, or I've got a SaaS application that will help with prioritizing potholes that are being reported by Open 311 services. Would that actually be useful to you guys?
Oh, absolutely. I think when one thinks of government, and even government in San Francisco, you think in this space, well, they're doing some creative things, they must have their act together. When you actually look at an organization like the City and County of San Francisco, you see an incredibly complex organization that is incredibly bureaucratic. And actually what you have are 52 or 55 individual business units all operating almost independently of each other. So what all of us need, because there are scarce resources, are the ability to understand our data better and to see kind of the management overview of that data, whether it be a dashboard or whatever it may be. So it's actually a very untapped market for the city, for developers, because we oftentimes are managing or running programs without sufficient insight into that data. And we're always looking for better ways to do that because the mayor is looking for it, our county government is looking for it. So I think we haven't even touched that internal market that you're suggesting is there, and I would welcome all of you in taking a look at our data and really helping us understand what is possible and what we can do with that internal market.
It also makes me think, there's small, innovative developers, but there are also big companies like Microsoft and Google. When, for example, Blaze is showing us this morning how Bing Maps is incorporating all these new data layers and mash-ins. Should you be doing more outreach to a company like Microsoft and say, okay, let's develop a strategy for putting government data onto your mapping platform? I mean, do we need any sort of more comprehensive thinking about that?
We do, and the challenge always
solve it once rather than solve it 100 times in each city.
Yeah. I think the issue for government is designed to ensure that no one has unfair influence on decision making.
Yeah.
So we are very much about competition, RFPs, open processes. So it's difficult for us to go with one vendor or another.
Oh, but I'm not suggesting you go with one vendor. I'm more thinking of targeted outreach. Like when when you know what you need to have built. Now, again, I know you guys are collaborating. There's a bunch of cities collaborating, for example, on Open 311. How do you, start to think about, if you're able to get a group of cities together and say, here are capabilities we need, you might be able to advertise this. The old model is the RFP, we're going to actually work with you, but the other is simply to develop some standards and then have some targeted outreach to companies saying, hey, we'd like you to adopt and support this standard.
No, you're exactly right. So what we're doing is banding together with other cities. I think there are about 6 or 7 of us now. And we have this dream, really, of developing a standard API, an open API for all government functions. And so we're calling it roughly the Open Cities API. And what we're trying to get to is agreement amongst all of the cities and then get agreement with the federal government on this standardized approach to look at all of this and actually have already discussed and started discussions with other companies who could be partners in helping this kind of vision be a reality.
Yeah, that's good, because I think part of this trellis and grapes approach, or what I've been calling government as a platform, really requires figuring out what's the architecture that does the right partitioning between what government provides. Now, there's a set of services that you have to provide, either by law or just by the responsibility of government. But then there's other things that are sort of optional, creative, enrichment for the city. But even within that, that span, there are things that you have to do yourself, and there are things that you can enable the market to do. And so it seems to me the design of an API is really the design of the context in which developers can participate with you in creating the future.
Yeah, exactly. And the problem for cities in San Francisco is not immune to this, is we are suffering from huge budget shortfalls, amazing lack of funds. And yet the expectation from our citizens, the people we serve, is that we actually provide more services 24/7 in ways that the private sector is providing services. So the only way that I know of to basically handle a reduced revenue stream and greater requesting or demand for services is to enable all of us together to work together to come up with the solutions and really come up with easier ways for you to work with us, because we are incredibly hard to work with, and figure out ways that we can actually make it easier for you to help us, and then we can start helping ourselves.
Yeah, I don't know if we have time for any questions. We could take maybe 1 or 2 if anybody is out there with. Do we have mic? No mics. Maybe we should just keep going. I'm seeing. Okay, shoot.
You were talking with the state. You said, are you in dialogue? I'm curious. I work for the state government of California, and so Terry Takai, the OCIO, is trying to make headway with a very similar vision. And I wondered, are you in dialogue with her, and what's going on there?
So the question is whether I'm in dialogue with the state CIO, Terry Takai, and the answer is yes. I've been talking with her for about a year about this, trying to figure out what the common data sets are, what we might do, how we might work together, and again, also talking to the folks at the federal level to see whether, since California is such a large state and diverse and such great talent, that maybe we could do a pilot project here of opening up data at the federal, state, and since I'm a city and a county, at a local level, and figure out what that might look like. And we've been having those discussions.
Yeah. Down here.
How has the sharing of transit data changed ridership? And what do you see as it opened up? What are the opportunities in that area?
So the question is, with the transportation development that's happened with this, what has happened to transit? Has it presumably gotten better or worse, or how has it changed? And just a little story. I was sitting on a street corner having a burger, actually, and I didn't pay attention, but there was a bus stop right there. And I just noticed that everybody pulled out their smartphone, whether it was an iPhone or whatever, and they were doing this, and they were just kind of waiting, and it was almost like they were timing the bus to that application to make sure that it came when the application said it would. And as they stood there, and in this case, there wasn't a bus when it was supposed to be, you could see kind of the anger on the people's faces, and they just took off, and then they waited at the next bus stop to see. So it is giving people a lot more insight into how to manage their time better and not waste it when they're waiting for the bus. And you, second part of your question?
What are the opportunities that this opens up?
Well, very quickly, and what Tim was talking about, it's a new business model, and I don't know what that new business model is yet, but it is, we've had the first experience of a major company actually advertising their ability to take our data, city data, and create interesting applications for other people or with other people. So I think we're just beginning to see this change, and it's going to be a very interesting model that I don't think anybody really knows yet, but I think will eventually get us, hopefully, to a much better place.
All right, with that, we're out of time. Chris, thanks a lot, and I don't think you're going to fail. I think you're going to enable some really exciting new functions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.